Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition Advocacy Network Town Hall on today. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us and to be on this important conversation about being advocates for those who are imprisoned and in the detention center system. So today I am Dr. Kimberly Limore. I am on the executive committee of the CPMC, and we just welcome you on today and thank you for taking this time out. I am going to open in prayer. I'll introduce two of our speakers who will then lead into our conversation, and we will go from there. Again, we are hoping for a conversation. We don't want to just talk at you or to you on today. We want you to participate in our town hall and ask questions that are prevalent to you so that you can get the answers that you need. Again, CPMC is a resource for you, and so that's what we want to be. So please feel free to ask questions or put them in the chat at the appropriate time. Again, thank you for joining us. And so our opening prayer, Proverbs 31, 8 through 9, really speaks to advocacy. And it says, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. Let us pray. Lord, thank you for this day, a day in which you have made, a day in which we shall rejoice and be glad in it. We thank you for giving us the opportunity to join you in your kingdom work, serving those who are in need of basic things like food and water, education and livelihoods. Help us to be the voice too of those who are imprisoned and in the detention system, those who are sometimes rendered voiceless. Give us the courage to pursue your calling and give us the words we need to speak your truth. As we pray in the name of your Son, Jesus, amen. Again, we thank you for joining us. And today we have two exciting panelists who are going to start our conversation off. One is Sammy Perez, and Sammy serves as the Prison Fellowships Advocacy Team by building and mobilizing a network of people who are passionate about justice that restores. Sammy equips Prison Fellowships justice advocates and justice ambassadors in the U.S. to raise awareness about criminal justice reform and improve the criminal justice system through strategies including digital advocacy, constituent lobbying, media engagement, and storytelling. And David Jimenez serves as the manager of government affairs for Prison Fellowships Advocacy and Public Policy Team, where he oversees federal and state legislative campaigns. His background is in public policy, advocacy, and institution building, most recently as a primary manager for the American Enterprise Institute's outreach to college students, faculty, and administrators. So I am right now going to turn it over to Sammy and David for the first part of our conversation. We welcome you on today.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be with you all today. Really grateful for this conversation. Want to just briefly introduce Prison Fellowship. We're the nation's largest Christian nonprofit serving prisoners, former prisoners, and their families. And we've been a leading advocate for criminal justice reform on and off the Hill, helping to secure victories related to smarter and more proportional sentencing, healthy, constructive, and safe prison cultures with robust access to programming. And finally, a culture of second chances where we're removing unnecessary barriers to the 1 in 3 American adults with a criminal record who have paid their debt to society, and a new critical important issues like police reform and pretrial reform. In much of this work, we've been really grateful to work alongside numerous Catholic partners like CPMC, Catholic Charities, USCCB, Catholic Mobilizing Network, and many others. So especially grateful for this opportunity to mobilize the church as Catholics, Christians, and evangelicals to advance a faith-based approach to criminal justice. The theme of this hour together will really be about how to have difficult conversations with lawmakers or lawmaker staffs. We often know that the fear of having challenging conversations where a difficult question might be asked, a disagreement might emerge, can often discourage and make individuals fearful of taking that step of asking for a lawmaker meeting and pursuing direct advocacy and lobbying opportunities. We know that hesitation, especially for ordinary citizens who aren't involved in public policy or politics every day, can be intimidating for any issue, but we know it's often particularly high for an issue like criminal justice, where deep emotions are often felt and deep issues of justice, community safety, what's owed to the community and the victim, and society at large are often involved. Thankfully, Prison Fellowship has an immense history of equipping individuals to pursue those conversations with courage, with candor, with flexibility, and with hope. And so I'm excited to turn it over to Sammy to just talk about some of the best practices we've learned in helping engage citizens step up and talk to their state and federal lawmakers about these tough issues, and then give you the opportunity to hear from some of our Catholic partners about some of their best tips in going into those conversations with hope, with thoughtfulness, and excitement for the opportunity to persuade and to listen well. And so with that, I'll turn it over to my wonderful colleague, Sammy Perez.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. And thank you, Dr. Limor, for that introduction. So I'd like to just start out today by sharing a little bit about the work that I do at Prison Fellowship. So I had the opportunity to work with our Justice Ambassador program, which our Justice Ambassadors are simply just Christians all around the nation who are passionate about criminal justice reform and who look to support the advocacy work that Prison Fellowship is involved in. And I oversee a team of 4 Justice Ambassador specialists who work one-on-one with these volunteers to equip them, to ensure that they have the resources that they need to raise awareness on the ground. And then we coach them on how to engage with their elected officials all the way from the beginning process to reaching out to a lawmaker and scheduling a meeting, to coaching them how to share their stories and ultimately how to engage in at times what can be challenging conversations. So, we know that we live in a very divided society, right? And oftentimes as we are engaging in even everyday conversations, but specifically as we are speaking to lawmaker offices or their staff, that oftentimes we can find ourselves on different sides of the issue that we may be discussing. And how we as Christians approach this and how we sort of represent our Lord and Savior within this space, I think is really, really pivotal and vital to our ability to be successful in persuading people to adopt more criminal justice reform or just more policies in general that are reflective of biblical values. So I'd love to just share a few of the tips that we provide our Justice Ambassadors as we are equipping them to engage in these types of conversations. And the first of those is essentially to avoid any emotional response. So oftentimes as we're engaging in these conversations, we ourselves may be really passionate about a specific issue, or we may be communicating with someone else who's extremely passionate. And when our emotions get involved, at times it can be difficult to sort of filter what our responses are. So how we train our ambassadors is to go in and try to remain as neutral as possible, and to avoid any sort of emotional responses or responses that could be provocative and sort of provoke the conversation to go or to be steered in the wrong direction. The second point that we use is to acknowledge, right? So we want to acknowledge that the individual that we're speaking with and wherever they may land on a specific issue, we want to acknowledge their position. We want to acknowledge any concerns that they have and or any feelings that they may be sharing with us. I think that this really allows us to start to connect more with the person that we may be speaking with. And so just acknowledging where folks are and, that we all have a right sort of to our own opinion, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that we agree with what they may be sharing, but we at a minimum want to acknowledge their feelings or their position and what it is that they're sharing. And then as we move from there, we want to really be able to find some level of agreement, right? So we can disagree about many different things, but what are the things that we can actually agree on? And I think even in the context of a very difficult conversation, if we're able to become more skilled and adept at identifying areas of agreement, this really equips and allows us to be able to build from that point of agreement and hopefully to be able to find some sort of middle ground where we can come to an effective solution. So finding that point of agreement, I think, is super important to beginning to establish sort of that rapport and just a safe place where we know this is an area within this more complex issue that we agree on, and how can we build from here to find a better solution. The next point is really just to be personal, right? So oftentimes elected officials and their staff, they have tons and tons of meetings. So you have constituents that are coming in each and every day, and they come in and they share why they are passionate about a specific issue, why the lawmaker should support the issue, and then they make the ask of the lawmaker. Oftentimes these meetings can run the potential of actually being redundant, or maybe staffers even becoming jaded or sort of tone deaf as they may be engaging with their constituents. So I think one of the areas of success that we have found as we equip our volunteers to go in and meet with their elected officials is to find something personal to connect and to relate to either the staffer or the lawmaker on. And that just may be as simple as just kind of scouring the lawmaker's website, before you have a meeting, just to see, is there anything that I can relate to on a personal level? Like, for example, I live in Virginia. And my Senator Warner, his wife is actually very passionate about foster care. And that's actually a passion that I share. So whenever I go to meet with Senator Warner's office, a simple thing that I may add to the conversation as we're starting out is just to say, hey, I just want, to say thank you to the senator. And also if you can express my thanks to his wife for the work that she does in the foster care system, because that is something that I'm really passionate about. And I just really appreciate the senator and his wife's support for that issue, right? And even something as simple as that is really just a way to sort of start to break down barriers within our interpersonal communication. So we don't want this to be a very, once again, just kind of like another meeting where there's a constituent that's coming in and they're just coming to share their opinion. We actually want to begin to build a bridge by being personal with them and being able to relate. We found that really just helps to break down a lot of those defenses that people may unintentionally or even sometimes knowingly come in with. And when we're able to do that, it's just really provides for a more productive meeting. And then the final point that I would share is just really learning to be a good listener. So like I mentioned before, a lot of times, most of these meetings, folks go in and they share about their opinions. But one of the things I think that as believers specifically, if we can learn to really become adept at listening to whatever the position or whatever the concern of the individual that we're speaking with may have, not only does that equip us to be better, more well-informed in our communication, so we can even take some of the points that they have and we can develop counter arguments or counterpoints that we can use as we're continuing to have conversations. But it really just, I think going back to that personal connection, it really relates to the individual on a personal level, right? Because at the end of the day, I think, as people, we all want to be acknowledged and we all want to be heard. And oftentimes just by simply going in very tactfully and stating, what it is that you believe in your position, even if it's on a difficult issue, and then pausing to listen or asking probing questions to the lawmaker or their staff that will sort of solicit a response that you can learn more about what their specific concerns may be. And that point there has been really pivotal in advancing a lot of our campaigns, because when we send our volunteers in and when we train them well to just simply listen, they oftentimes can come back to prison fellowship with very informative pieces of information that will help our follow-up contact with the office, or will help to advance our campaigns in many different ways. So those are just a few of the tips that we provide to our justice ambassadors as we are equipping them to have difficult conversations with their lawmakers and with their staff. But I'd love to actually take a moment to open it up to the Advocacy Network Panel and bring that panel up. I'm sure we have a lot of different folks here with different levels of experience and expertise, and would love to hear if there's anything that you all would have to share and could add to this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sammy and David, for kicking us off. And I echo everything Sammy said. Amazing tips that I even use in my advocacy as well. My name is Christy Williams. I work for Catholic Charities USA, and we're based out of Alexandria, Virginia. The policy staff here at Catholic Charities USA advocate with the federal government on the Hill on federal legislative issues, anti-poverty legislative issues that promote human dignity and really give our brothers and sisters that are returning to society a second chance to contribute to society and to rebuild their lives. And so my role here is to track federal legislation that affect people that are incarcerated, that affect programs that serve people that are incarcerated, as well as programs here in the community that serve people that are returning to society. The Catholic Charities Network, 167 Catholic charities agencies across the country, about 100 of them serve people that have been touched by the justice system, whether they have a loved one that's incarcerated or whether they are individuals themselves that are either in prison or returning home, trying to rebuild their lives. And so these issues are very important to Catholic Charities USA. Again, I want to echo what Sammy said as far as having those very difficult conversations. I'll just give examples of what I've done myself when advocating on these very important issues. As Christians, as Catholics, we want to bring the moral voice to these conversations, but it's also important to take into account that sometimes, as much as the moral voice is important, sometimes it's not a priority for certain offices that you may walk into. And that not necessarily mean that that person may not have a moral compass, but, sometimes, the issues are placed in tiers that may not be in the same order of priority as us, Christian advocates and Catholic advocates. And so sometimes when you walk into certain offices, Catholic social teachings, which informs, Catholics' advocacy on these issues, may not resonate with that office. And so what do? As Sammy said, you want to look for, a common ground. What issues, what key areas of that legislation or policy that will resonate with that office, that will at least start the conversation going. It may be public safety, for example, right? Everyone wants to feel safe, whether they're Catholic or not. It may be an economic argument, making the case for why supporting the bill or opposing the bill is good for the local economy. It's good for, creating jobs and helping, returning citizens enter the workforce. So looking at those different areas where you can find common ground with that office certainly helps. And of course, whenever there's an opportunity for you to bring up the moral argument, it's always encouraged, because it's never a bad argument to make, right? We all want to ensure that our lawmakers are, are voting, their conscience and upholding the conscience of their constituents. And the other point I also want to highlight is that sometimes you may find yourself in a position of an educator. So that may very well end up becoming your advocacy goal. A lot of the issues that, congressional members take on, their staffers, many of them have little expertise on these subjects, right? Many of them are handling very different issue areas and huge portfolios, whether it's energy or immigration or education, and then criminal justice reform or prison reform. And so as you're going into these offices, whether it's state level legislation or a federal level legislation, keep in mind that you may become an educator to the person that you're speaking to, because you may have more information or more experience working on those issues. You already work in the field of supporting returning citizens to your community. So you can speak as an expert as to how that policy may translate into the field, to give them a better sense of, the kinds of decisions that would have a positive impact on the community. And the last thing that I will say is that storytelling, I can't emphasize storytelling enough. It is a key advocacy tool. Whenever I'm going to advocate on a federal legislation, I always reach out, or I try to at least reach out to the local Catholic Charities agency that may be working in that congressional member's district. Whether it's, serving, youth that have been touched by the justice system, or an agency that's running a transitional housing program or something. And I ask them, I'm going to speak to such and such office about this bill. Can you talk about, a recent case or a recent instance where, this particular issue really impacted your work and your services to your clients and your community? How did the community respond? Is that something that you would be willing to join me, in my meeting with this office, so you can tell, your story about how you experience this play out in the field? And sometimes, they may bring personal stories of their clients, and sometimes they may be bringing their own stories about, the work that they are doing. And that's always helpful, because again, the people that are in Washington are the people that are, at your state legislature office. They are not in the field. They don't see what happens on a daily basis. And so your stories bring that into their offices and gives them the information that they're not seeing or have access to every day. So I'll pause here, and then I'm not sure who I'm turning it over to next, but I look forward to your questions at the end.
I'll hop in. Thank you. And same, I'm just going to continue echoing what Christy said, what Sammy shared. My name is Ingrid Delgado. I work as a policy advisor at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, Office of Domestic Social Development, previously worked for the Florida Conference of Catholic Bishops. So I've had the absolute privilege of working in this intersection for about 10 years, right, of representing my faith in the public policy process. And so I'm a mom of 3, and a lot of the analogies in my head have to do with parenting. And so I think of meeting with members on difficult issues kind of looks like preparing a diaper bag, right? So those of you who have kids and have prepared a diaper bag, that the day you forget baby wipes is the day that the only thing your child needs is baby wipes, right? And so it's really important to have everything you need in that diaper bag. And meeting with members is similar, right? When you're talking about an issue, it's important to have just all the different arguments kind of set in your mind, right? And as Sammy was saying, Christy was saying, you want to have those prompting questions. You want to know where this member comes from, right, on this issue. And then you want to pull on that thread, right? And so for about 10 years, I've been involved in advocating for an end to the use of the death penalty. And with some members, the moral argument really resonates, right? The pro-life argument, the risk of executing an innocent person. For other people, they want to know how murder victims' family members feel about about the issue, right? They want to know the fiscal impact, or sometimes the big government argument, right? It really resonates with people. So it's important for you to kind of be prepared to talk about this, your issue from all these different perspectives. And I think the other really important thing is it's okay to not know everything, right? Like you don't have to make things up in a meeting when you don't know the answer, right? If they just kind of threw you a curveball and you don't know how to respond, it's perfectly okay to say, you know what, I'm going to follow up with you. Or may I have colleagues of mine, right, at Catholic Charities USA or at the USCCB follow up with you and give you maybe, those that additional information or those technical answers and things like that. And with that, let me turn it over to Tom.
Cool. Thanks so much, Ingrid, and Christy and Sammy. I guess the bad part of going last is that everything profound and deep and important has been said. So I don't have anything to say. No, I'm just kidding. Thanks so much for the opportunity. When I think of having difficult conversations, the first thing that comes to my mind is, especially when we do this work, right? Because if we're, as Catholics, as Christians, if we're doing this work right, we're going to be having lots of difficult conversations, right? Because this is we are working. This is conversion work, right? Like we don't go out to preach to the converted. We go out to convert, and that necessarily means entering into difficult, uncomfortable conversations, and basing those conversations on, as has been said before, shared humanity, shared common ground. So if we're doing advocacy right, we're having lots of difficult conversations, more difficult conversations than just chummy get-togethers where everybody agrees. And so when I think about that, I think about a couple of things. One is some valuable information that I got a long time ago, and that is check your priors. We tend to be surrounded by media and social media, mass media that creates a narrative of political binaries, at state and local levels, and a lot of times that's true. But if we're doing this work, it helps to set those things aside and try to resist the urge to just pigeonhole the office that you're going in to see, or the person that you're going in to see, in a political binary. And like, this is a Republican officer, they're going to believe this, or this is a Democratic officer, they're going to believe that. Setting aside those priors, intentionally setting aside those priors before a meeting tends to relax the body, right? And so you're not walking in with this ball of like, okay, well, what am I about to get myself into? It tends to relax the body when you try to set aside those, like, I don't know what I'm about to have. I know what I'm about to say, but I don't know what I'm about to encounter. And so that helps. And the second thing I would say along these lines is just focus on breathing. It seems counterintuitive, or maybe something that we don't quite focus on, but when you take a couple deep breaths and you get all of that oxygen into your body, again, the physiological response of your body combats that stress response that tends to try to protect us when we're entering into a difficult conversation. So I guess I can stop there in the interest of having a roundtable discussion. But since so much of the other more profound things have been said, I figured I would talk a little bit about the sort of like the physiology of our bodies and stress, and how to relax that as we walk into difficult conversations.
Can I just add a couple of things before turning over to questions, and I think to Kim?
I'm sorry, Dave.
Oh, sure. No, just wanted to build on the comments made about active listening and how it especially relates to criminal justice reform, because I think what everyone knows here is that there is dysfunction and injustice and failure across the criminal justice system, from the arrest phase to the reentry phase. And what we do often find, given all those problems, is that we have lawmakers who are ready and willing to work with us on an issue of reentry, but might not be there with us on an issue of sentencing or vice versa. So ready to go to work at access to more programming in prison or jail, but really not in a spot to advocate and lead on police reform. That's one reason why listening well in meetings is so important, so that when you go into an office and you see that you're not finding common ground on one particular problem in the justice system, that your mind, your psyche, your emotions are still giving you that listening heart to identify other issues or other ways to work together. So that's something that has just been prompted by other things that have been shared. The second, I think several folks have emphasized the importance of making public safety arguments for the reforms that we care about. We know many of us come to the criminal justice space because of many values that have guided our work, and sometimes public safety is a driver of that, but not the only driver of that. I think in this political and cultural environment that we're in, really making sure that we're making the public safety case for the issues that we care about. Maybe not the first issue that we come into a visit with, but definitely in the second or third tier as we walk a lawmaker through a policy or bill we care about. And I want to just emphasize the balancing act. I think we've all tried to encourage everyone to do your homework as much as you can. So understand the issue, have some good data, think about counter arguments, research a lawmaker. All of that is great to have a great productive meeting. But I also want to emphasize too that most lawmakers and most staff understand and recognize and respect that constituents are not lobbyists. They're not there to be, the full-time expert who understands every single part of a policy issue. And they will respect simply the power of this constituent has given an hour, a day, 30 minutes of their time to share with me of something that they care about. So to quote Woody Allen, 90% of success is showing up. And I think for constituent lobbying, 90% of success is showing up. So want to affirm that while preparation is important, the power of you simply being there and sharing in a simple way why you have a heart for these issues and for these problems is itself very, very powerful and really goes the furthest in getting a lawmaker to vote or just to think about issues in a more positive light. So those were just things that were prompted by the amazing remarks, both from my colleague, Sammy, and my partners in the trenches from among our Catholic colleagues.
Great. This has been so informative, and I hope everyone out here has questions for us. And now's the time to ask those questions. I got a full view. If anyone wants to raise their hand or put something in the chat, you're welcome to do that at this time. And as people are preparing to do that, I do have a question myself. So as being, I come from a very social justice active parish in Chicago. And we've done the whole, the legislation and going out and being advocates and going to the Hill and things like that. And the importance, though, I know of knowing which House bills are about to come up to vote and the right time to go. How does that information, especially in the prison environment, how does that information get out to some of us commoners? Is it by connecting with areas like CPMC or whatever other organizations are out there?
If I may jump in. So for example, when I worked in Florida, right? Like anybody can go to the myfloridahouse.gov or flsenate.gov website, and you can look at what's been filed, and you can create a free account and track bills that are filed. Here's the thing, in Florida, there are 3,500 bills filed every session, right? So it's hard to track. So then second to that, I would say, sign up for advocacy alerts with organizations that you trust, right? It could be the US Conference of Catholic Bishops. It could be your state Catholic conference. It could be Catholic Charities USA. But, an organization that aligns with your values, sign up for their action alerts, and they will flag for you, right? Like a certain bill is coming up. This is kind of the terminology we're using to support this bill, to oppose this bill. And a lot of these organizations will pre-write for you a message to your elected officials. And so it could be as easy as, hitting send. or if you are personally impacted by the issue, you can always, adjust it a little bit and include your personal story.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
On the federal.
Oh, go ahead, Christy.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, David. On the federal level, if you're tracking, a federal legislation and you want to know when it'll, come up for a hearing or a vote, the easiest way to track that, especially if you know the bill number, is to just track the committee that it's in. And so sometimes they'll post on that committee's website, when it's up for a hearing or some kind of, oh, thanks, David, for the reminder, or, when it's coming up for a hearing or a vote. And the Washington Weekly as well, which goes out, the Catholic Charities USA's policy team sends out the Washington Weekly. It's a weekly newsletter every Friday, which highlights some of the bills that we're tracking in Congress, and it ranges from a broad range of issues, whether it's nutrition, criminal justice reform, immigration, and the whole 9 yards. And we highlight some key bills that may be coming up for a hearing or a vote. And if there are action alerts that we're putting out, we'll also include that in the Washington Weekly that you can participate in.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to echo for everyone that the value of getting looped into organizations that you trust on these particular issues, both to save you time, of course, but also just to really outsource to someone else parsing through that information. Because I think when any of us goes to a state legislative website, we can see a list of bills, and some of them are great, but looking at that website, we're not able to tell as a engaged citizen who's not in this work every day, okay, this bill has a really good chance of passing. This bill is led by a lawmaker who has a lot of credibility. This bill is important, but maybe will take 3 or 4 years to actually get done. And this bill could be heard for a vote as early as next week. So having, credible organizations that can save you the time to think about using your time well and budgeting your time well to actually focus on impact. So one platform we have is the Justice Action Center on the Prison Fellowship website, where we highlight different key federal campaigns that we have for bills that we think are important and have a good chance of moving either this year or on a close time horizon, and using that to become part of our Justice Advocate Network, where we're able to provide real-time emergency opportunities to get engaged on Capitol Hill. We have some other in there. We aren't able to provide that for every single state legislature, but we do have similar work to provide real-time opportunities in Oklahoma, Tennessee, Virginia, Ohio, Michigan, Virginia, and Texas, where we're able to recreate that type of focus campaign. And then, as Sammy alluded to at the beginning, we also have our Justice Ambassador program, where we equip people to really get the training and support they need to be confident to engage directly with a lawmaker on issues that are close to them that relate to crime and incarceration.
Great. Thank you all. RJ Mangan has a question, if you want to.
Yes, thank you. So I guess not so much a question as a comment. One was that the Catholic Mobilizing Network is also a fantastic resource for keeping up to date, especially on things regarding restorative justice and the death penalty, particularly. I will throw a link to them up here.
Great.
But as well, I guess as encouragement in my own experience, I mean, this is something that I've only started doing for the past about year now. And one of the most important things that I've always carried into any conversation with a lawmaker is they're a person, just like you or me. They're another human being who happens to be in that office. And what's really funny is I think what has already been recommended is exactly where it's at, is to know who the person is you're going in to speak with. If you can do any kind of background information on, like what committees are they currently on, what kind of bills have they supported in the past, what exactly are their areas of interest, and well, of course, for a lot of people, that's not exactly what your job is on a daily basis, and it isn't particularly mine either, but. I mean, it is part of what I do, but it's only a part. And there's a general fear, I guess, of just getting into the nitty-gritty of reading the law itself. That actually, funny enough, can go a very long way in conversation, talking about specific items, particularly for something that's coming up soon, because it shows the lawmaker that, well, you actually did your homework, and you know what you're talking about, at least to a degree, because they can end up with, of course, very busy, and I guess for myself, a question then I think that would be good for everybody is kind of, what are organizations, I suppose, or kind of initiatives that you could propose in your own diocese, to try to get more people more active. Especially, Civilize It is something particularly that I've seen, which I really love. I really love the pledge. I really want to try to promote that, to kind of try to create that platform for a dialogue in this modern polarization that we're experiencing. How do you break that open, just on a parochial level?
Ray, I just want to flag something on that question, and here I'm speaking more for Prison Fellowship, which we mobilize many Catholic individuals and communities, but not the same diocesan focus. One thing that we've sometimes found is, I think for communities or for churches that are new to advocacy, sometimes starting with, sentencing, bail reform, police reform, that's a bit of a big lift, and that can scare people. And so we have found that sometimes doing something more focused on reentry, making sure that people who have paid their debts to society have access to work, to housing, to education, making sure that when they're held accountable in prison, they're in a safe, constructive environment where they're being made into leaders, not repeat offenders. Sometimes we found that the conversations about prison programming and then reentry and second chances is often a good bridge before getting to the conversations that need to be had about sentencing, pretrial, bail reform. We don't work on the death penalty, but I know that's close to many people here. So I think about that when y'all are trying to engage communities that are new to the space. Think about kind of what issue is a good first step, to borrow from the First Step Act, to make advocacy feel more natural and organic and less scary to people.
Well, thank you very much.
Great.
Can I hop in there too?
Yeah.
So a couple of things that I was involved in Florida. So like when I worked at the State Catholic Conference, some parishes did invite me to present at their parishes or at like a conference that the diocese was hosting, to give a presentation on faithful citizenship, because not everyone knows that this is actually part of our faith. This isn't an option, right? To create a just society, part of that work includes, changing unjust structures, right? There were parishes that would invite, for example, death row exonerees to kind of tell their personal story and put a face to the issue, right? And then not just make people kind of mad and frustrated about the issue, but then give people ways that they could advocate on a bill, for example, right, around the death penalty, things like that. I think bulletins give you an opportunity too, right, to encourage people to sign up for your State Catholic Conference Action Network or USCCBs or Catholic Charities USAs. And a lot of state Catholic conferences have like a Catholic Days at the Capitol. USCCB hosts the Catholic Social Ministry Gathering. And I think that once people kind of get a taste of advocacy, a lot of times they get hooked, right? Like I remember Catholic Days at the Capitol in Florida, there was this one gentleman that got so mad at his state representative that he ran for that position and won, right? I know, it's a great story. And so I think that people can either get really encouraged about advocating or get mad enough to want to be involved more.
Can I just, to build on Ingrid's point, advocacy on Capitol Hill is great from constituents. It makes a difference, but I do want to emphasize the state outreach is very powerful, because state lawmakers often don't get the same volume of outreach from their constituents that the federal side gets. I think all of us do kind of fall into the trap, myself included, of thinking that every big decision is made on Capitol Hill, when that's really not true, especially for issues like crime and incarceration that are really a state and local issue. So do and emphasize, to Ingrid's point, just the power of doing a direct meeting in the building of a state capitol really can strike people in a way that's unique relative to federal work, as important as that is. We'd love for you guys to help us on the Hill as well. Yes, very true to Bodil. And Ingrid's point at the end just also reminded me too of sometimes things can be in the reverse. So I think for many Catholic communities, they actually might be comfortable doing the death penalty first as the issue to work on because of the pro-life side, the sanctity of life. And then that's the thing that gets them plugged into, okay, let me think about sentencing, prison programming, criminal justice reform as a whole. So definitely hold to the advice I shared earlier, but just think about wherever you are, what is the good first issue to get started with? And sometimes it might be death penalty, sometimes it might be second chances. Really just depends based on the people you're trying to get engaged.
Great. This is so interesting. There was a question from somebody in the chat. Raymond, do you want to ask your question? Or do you want me to just read it from the chat message?
Okay, yeah, I'm in Florida, so I understand your difficulties. I plan to meet with my state senator. I know him. He came to the prison once before and met with our veterans, and I'm gonna work with him hopefully on how to stop wasting some of the money that we waste in incarceration, and especially we've kind of done away with the parole system in Florida. And yet there's still, if you're like in your 80s or 90s, you can still get paroled, but they still don't parole anybody. And I want to talk to him about that because it costs $30,000 a year to incarcerate these guys, and probably more because they're older. So I want to bring that to his attention. And also, Tom Mulloy has funded us for several years on reentry. And so I want to go in and update him on the things we've done on reentry and getting ahead while getting out, and use that, and then try to ease into, we could save a lot of money, but I know it's big business down here. So if he cuts the budget, he's on the appropriations committee for criminal justice. So, I mean, he could affect this, but I'm sure there's a lot of folks that are feeding at that trough and they don't want to see the spigot turned off. So I guess I'm going to start with what we're doing on reentry, and then ease into the funding. There's things we could do better. And then, do you see any potholes in that approach?
Raymond, just an initial point of advice. We have found in this environment that the cost-saving argument, while definitely persuasive, is not as powerful as it used to be, because we have had plenty of lawmakers say, I know prisons are more expensive, but that's what we need to keep people safe. From our experience, we have found with lawmakers who might be more skeptical, it's really first about the public safety case and then the fiscal responsibility case. So I think with parole, we have found that sometimes a stronger argument is not this will save money, but primarily this will incentivize people to use their time in prison well, to complete programming, to follow the rules, to respect correctional staff. And by going on parole, they're able to kind of have a smoother handoff to the community where they can practice a lot of those good habits. Versus going out onto the streets without any type of supervision. Does that make sense? Is that helpful?
Right. Okay. So you're thinking that my approach probably won't work.
I would just change the order more from reentry, safety case for parole, and then the fiscal side of things.
Oh yeah. That's what I was going to do.
So just more about the order, not the actual arguments, which are all, I think, are really good. Really key and valuable.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Now, and this is the CPMC Advocacy Network is a monthly a program that we are presenting on the third Thursday of each month. And we are very interested in learning what topics would be of interest to you as we go forth. So if you could put that in the chat, that would be great, so that we'll know how to present this each month, and the wonderful panelists that we could reach out to address some of the issues and questions that you may have. Any other last question? It was at 12:54 my time, 1:54 Eastern time. So as we are about to wrap up, again, we thank you for sharing with us and coming on today. Our panelists, Ingrid from USCCB, Christy from CCUSA, and Tom from Jesuit Conference, as well as Sammy and David from the Prison Fellowship. And again, we are a resource for those who are working in prison ministry or involved in justice or restorative justice. So we are just so glad and to be able to offer this service to those who are in this. There's been kind of a disconnect with that. And, we have so many different networks. And so we try to bring all of those who are working in this area together in one place. So again, we thank you for joining us on today. And we hope that you can join us next month or each week, really, on Thursdays for each of the panel discussions that we might be presenting. But if, like I say, again, if you have a question about the advocacy network, join us in this conversation each and every month on the third Thursday. But be sure to put all of that or send us an email on different topics that may be of interest to you. Well, let's just give our panelists a hand for that wonderful presentation and the outstanding information that they provided to us. So again, we thank you, and we'll see you soon.